Everyone talks about work-life balance, but here's the truth. Champions don't want you to know. They don't balance anything. They master something called the performance Trinity. And in the next 3 hours, I'm going to show you exactly how they use it to outperform everyone else while working fewer hours. But first, you need to understand why everything you've been taught about energy, focus, and emotions is keeping you mediocre. Most people think performance is about grinding harder, pushing through fatigue, and forcing yourself to focus when your brain is scattered. They believe success comes from willpower and motivation. But that's amateur thinking. Champions operate from a completely different framework. They don't fight their biology, they optimize it. I spent years studying this phenomenon. I analyzed the daily routines of Olympic athletes, the work patterns of Nobel Prize winners, the habits of billionaire entrepreneurs, and the systems of world-class performers across every conceivable field. What I discovered shocked me. These people weren't just more talented or more motivated. They were operating with completely different performance architecture. Here's what I discovered after studying peak performers across every field. The top 1% don't manage energy, focus, and emotions separately. They stack them. They understand that these three systems are neurologically connected, and when you master their integration, you don't just improve your performance. You transform into someone who operates at levels most people can't even comprehend. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have unlimited energy while working fewer hours? How they maintain laser focus for hours while others get distracted after minutes? How they stay calm and decisive under pressure while others crack under stress? It's not genetics. It's not luck. It's systems. The average person experiences maybe 30 minutes of peak performance per day if they're lucky. Champions experience hours of peak performance day after day, year after year. The difference isn't talent. It's understanding how to create and sustain optimal states systematically. You're about to learn what takes most people decades to figure out, if they ever do. You already have everything you need to master this. Your brain is wired for legendary performance. You just need the right protocols to unlock it. By the time you finish this, you won't just understand peak performance, you'll embody it. But here's what separates this from everything else you've learned. You're not getting theory. You're getting the exact systems. Not motivation that fades, but architecture that lasts. Not tips that work sometimes, but protocols that work every time. You're about to discover why 99% of people operate at 30% capacity while champions effortlessly sustain excellence. Here's what most people never realize. Every single day, you make hundreds of micro decisions that either enhance or degrade your performance capacity. From the moment you wake up to the moment you sleep, your energy, focus, and emotional systems are being shaped by choices you might not even notice. Champions understand this. They've optimized these micro decisions into systems that automatically create peak performance conditions. Right now, you're probably operating at a fraction of your actual capacity. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't want success badly enough, but because you've never been taught how your performance systems actually work. You've been given pieces of the puzzle, but never the complete picture. Let me paint you a picture of what most people's day actually looks like from a performance perspective. They wake up and immediately reach for their phone, flooding their brain with cortisol and dopamine before they're even fully conscious. This single action fragments their attention for the next 3 hours. They skip breakfast or grab something processed, creating blood sugar instability that makes sustained focus impossible. They drink coffee to mask fatigue instead of addressing why they're tired, creating an artificial energy spike followed by an inevitable crash. Most people wake up already depleted. They check their phone immediately, flooding their brain with cortisol before they're even conscious. They drink coffee to mask fatigue instead of addressing why they're tired. They force themselves to focus on important work while their energy is scattered across 12 different concerns. Then they wonder why they feel burnt out by noon. They sit down to work, but their environment is designed for distraction. Notifications enabled, cluttered workspace, poor lighting, suboptimal temperature. They try to multitask, switching between email, social media, and actual work, creating massive attention residue that fragments their cognitive capacity. By 10 a.m., they're already operating at 60% capacity. By noon, they're down to 40%. By afternoon, they're running on fumes. But the real tragedy is this. They think this is normal. They think everyone struggles with focus. They think everyone feels tired by afternoon. They think everyone gets overwhelmed by their emotions. They don't realize that champions operate in a completely different reality. This isn't a character flaw. It's a systems problem. You've been taught to manage symptoms instead of optimizing root causes. You've been told to push through instead of working with your biology. You've been given productivity hacks when what you need is performance architecture. Think about this. If you're operating at 30% capacity, that means 70% of your potential is locked away. Imagine if you could access even half of that locked potential. Your output would more than double. Your quality would skyrocket. Your stress would plummet because everything would feel easier when you're operating with your full capacity instead of fighting against yourself. The solution isn't working harder. It's understanding the three fundamental systems that determine your performance capacity and learning to optimize them individually. Then integrate them for compound advantages. Here's what changes everything. Energy, focus, and emotions aren't separate systems you manage independently. They're neurologically integrated. Your energy state determines your capacity for focus. Your focus quality affects your emotional regulation. Your emotional state amplifies or depletes your energy. When you understand this connection, you stop fighting against yourself and start working with your natural design. Let me give you a concrete example. When your energy is low, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for focus and decision-making, literally has less fuel to operate. This isn't metaphorical. Brain imaging studies show that energy-depleted brains have reduced activity in areas responsible for attention control. So when you try to force focus while energy depleted, you're not just being lazy, you're fighting against basic neurobiology. Think about the last time you felt truly energized, completely focused, and emotionally centered all at once. Remember how effortless everything felt? How problems seemed simple, decisions came naturally, and you accomplished more in an hour than you usually do in a day? That wasn't an accident. That was your performance trinity in alignment. The neuroscience is crystal clear on this. When your energy systems are optimized, your brain produces more BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which literally grows new neural connections and enhances cognitive performance. When your focus is trained, your anterior cingulate cortex becomes more efficient at filtering distractions and managing attention. When your emotions are regulated, your prefrontal cortex maintains executive control instead of being hijacked by your amygdala. But here's the crucial insight. These systems don't just operate independently. They create feedback loops. Optimized energy enhances focus capacity. Enhanced focus improves emotional regulation. Improved emotional regulation increases energy efficiency. When all three systems are working together, you get what scientists call cognitive coherence, a state where your entire brain is working in harmony rather than fighting against itself. Most people experience this maybe once a month by chance. Champions create it on demand. They understand that peak performance isn't about grinding harder. It's about stacking these three systems strategically. When your energy is optimized, focus becomes easier. When your focus is sharp, emotional regulation improves. When your emotions are stable, energy amplifies. Here's a practical example of how this integration works. Let's say you need to have a difficult conversation with a colleague. Most people would try to force themselves through it, while energetically depleted, emotionally reactive, and cognitively scattered. Champions would first optimize their energy through specific breathing techniques and posture adjustments. Then they'd sharpen their focus through attention anchoring practices. Finally, they'd regulate their emotional state through visualization or reframing techniques. By the time they enter the conversation, they're operating with their full capacity instead of a fraction of it. But here's where most people get it wrong. They try to fix everything at once. They attempt to optimize energy, master focus, and regulate emotions simultaneously. This creates cognitive overload and system failure. Champions know there's a sequence, a specific order that makes mastery inevitable rather than overwhelming. You're about to learn this sequence. You're ready for this because you understand the connection now. Most people never get past surface-level productivity tips, but you're thinking at a systems level. That puts you in the top 10% already. Here's the brutal reality. Most people leak performance constantly without realizing it. They wake up with 100% potential and systematically drain it through micro-decisions that seem harmless but compound into massive performance loss. By the time they sit down to do their most important work, they're already operating at 30% capacity. Let me walk you through exactly how this happens, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The performance leaks start the moment you wake up. Within the first 5 minutes of consciousness, most people make 3 critical errors that sabotage their entire day. The energy leaks start immediately. Checking notifications floods the brain with incomplete tasks, creating background anxiety that burns mental energy all day. This isn't just inconvenient, it's neurologically devastating. Each unfinished task creates what psychologists call a Zeigarnik effect. Your brain literally cannot stop thinking about incomplete information. So when you check your phone and see 17 emails, 12 text messages, and 43 social media notifications, you've just loaded your brain with 62 incomplete tasks that will burn cognitive energy for hours. Skipping breakfast or eating processed food creates blood sugar instability that makes sustained focus impossible. Your brain consumes 20% of your total energy despite being only 2% of your body weight. When your blood sugar spikes and crashes, your brain's fuel supply becomes erratic, forcing it to shift into survival mode rather than performance mode. This is why you can feel energetic one moment and completely drained 30 minutes later. Making decisions about trivial things, what to wear, what to eat, which route to take, burns through decision-making energy before important choices arrive. Decision fatigue is real and measurable. Studies show that judges make more lenient parole decisions early in the day when their decision-making capacity is fresh, and harsher decisions later in the day when their cognitive resources are depleted. If judges who make life-altering decisions all day suffer from decision fatigue, imagine what happens when you waste this precious resource on choosing between 17 different coffee options. But the focus destruction is even more insidious. Most people switch between tasks constantly, creating what neuroscientists call attention residue. Every time you switch contexts, part of your brain stays stuck on the previous task. You think you're multitasking efficiently, but you're actually fragmenting your cognitive capacity. Research from Stanford shows that people who multitask take 50% longer to complete tasks and make 50% more errors. By afternoon, your brain feels like a computer with 30 programs running simultaneously. Everything slows down. Here's what's really happening in your brain when you task switch. Your anterior cingulate cortex has to disengage from the current task. Your prefrontal cortex has to shift attention to the new task, and your brain has to reload the context and rules for the new activity. This process takes an average of 23 minutes for complex tasks. Most people never give their brain 23 uninterrupted minutes, which means they never actually achieve full cognitive engagement with anything. The emotional patterns are the most damaging because they affect everything else. Most people carry unprocessed stress from yesterday into today. They react to every email like it's urgent, flooding their system with cortisol. They engage with negative news and social media, priming their brain for threat detection instead of creative problem solving. By the time they need emotional regulation for difficult decisions or challenging conversations, their emotional resources are already depleted. Here's the compound effect. By 10 a.m., most people have already made dozens of micro decisions that have depleted their energy, fragmented their focus, and destabilized their emotions. They're trying to do their most important work with severely compromised systems. It's like trying to drive a car with sugar in the gas tank, a cracked windshield, and 3 flat tires. You might make progress, but it's going to be slow, inefficient, and exhausting. This creates a vicious cycle. Low energy makes focus difficult. Poor focus makes emotions volatile. Unstable emotions drain energy faster. Most people spend their entire career trapped in this cycle, never realizing they have the capacity for legendary performance. They just need to stop the leaks and stack the systems correctly. Champions operate from a completely different framework. They protect their energy like it's their most valuable resource because it is. They design their focus like an architect designs a building, with intention, precision, and systematic planning. They regulate their emotions like a pilot controls an aircraft, proactively, skillfully, and with constant awareness of changing conditions. Champions understand that peak performance isn't about working harder. It's about eliminating inefficiency and amplifying what works. They don't try to push through system failures. They prevent system failures from occurring in the first place. Here's how champions actually operate. They stack energy, focus, and emotions in a specific sequence that creates compound performance gains. They don't try to optimize everything simultaneously. They build one system, then use it to enhance the next, then integrate all 3 for exponential results. The sequence matters because your brain has limited processing capacity. When you try to change everything at once, you overwhelm your prefrontal cortex and default back to old patterns. But when you master one system first, it creates the foundation for the next. Energy optimization makes focus training easier. Focus mastery makes emotional regulation more sustainable. Emotional stability amplifies energy efficiency. Think of it like building a skyscraper. You don't construct all floors simultaneously. You create a solid foundation, then build upward systematically. Each level supports the next. Each system reinforces the others. By the time you reach the top, the entire structure is stronger than any individual component. Here's the exact sequence champions use. First, they optimize their energy systems because energy is the fuel for everything else. You cannot sustain focus without adequate energy. You cannot regulate emotions when you're running on empty. Energy optimization creates the biological foundation for peak performance. But here's what most people get wrong about energy. They think it's just about sleep and caffeine. Champions understand that energy has 4 distinct components: physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, and spiritual energy. Physical energy comes from optimized sleep, nutrition, movement, and recovery. Mental energy comes from cognitive efficiency and decision management. Emotional energy comes from processing feelings and maintaining positive states. Spiritual energy comes from purpose, meaning, and connection to something larger than yourself. Second, they activate focus because directed attention channels energy toward high-value outcomes. Unfocused energy creates activity without accomplishment. Focused energy creates laser-like concentration that cuts through complexity and confusion. Champions use optimized energy to fuel sustained, deep focus rather than scattered, shallow attention. Focus isn't just concentration, it's attention architecture. Champions understand that focus has 3 levels: selective attention, choosing what to focus on; sustained attention, maintaining focus over time; and divided attention, managing multiple focus streams when necessary. They train each level systematically, rather than hoping concentration will improve accidentally. Third, they regulate emotions because stable emotions provide the context for sustainable excellence. Emotional volatility destabilizes energy and fragments focus. Emotional stability amplifies both energy efficiency and focus quality. Champions use optimized energy and focused attention to create and maintain optimal emotional states. But here's the advanced integration principle. Once all three systems are optimized individually, they begin to reinforce each other automatically. Stable emotions enhance energy efficiency. Sustained focus improves emotional regulation. Optimized energy makes both focus and emotional control easier. The integration multiplier effect means that combined systems create performance that exceeds the sum of individual contributions. When energy, focus, and emotions are perfectly aligned, champions don't just perform better. They operate in a completely different category where excellence feels effortless and sustainable. Here's a practical example of how this stacking works. Let's say you have an important presentation to deliver. Most people would simply hope they feel energetic and focused when the time comes. Champions would stack their systems deliberately. First, they'd optimize their energy through strategic nutrition, hydration, movement, and breathing. Then they'd sharpen their focus through attention training and environmental optimization. Finally, they'd regulate their emotional state through visualization, confidence anchoring, and stress inoculation. By the time they walk into the presentation, they're operating with their full capacity instead of hoping for their partial capacity. This is why most performance advice fails. People try to implement 15 habits simultaneously and wonder why nothing sticks. They attempt advanced focus techniques while their energy is chaos. They try emotional regulation strategies while their attention is scattered. It's like trying to drive a Formula One car when you haven't learned basic vehicle operation. Champions start with energy because it's the foundation everything else builds on. You can't sustain focus without optimized energy. You can't regulate emotions when you're running on empty. But when your energy systems are dialed in, focus becomes natural. When your focus is sharp, emotions become manageable. When your emotions are stable, energy amplifies. The beautiful thing about this approach is that each level of mastery makes the next level easier. By the time you're integrating all three systems, you're not adding complexity. You're orchestrating systems that already work independently. You're conducting a symphony instead of learning individual instruments. You're ready for this because you understand the architecture now. You see why piecemeal approaches fail and systematic approaches succeed. You're thinking like someone who builds sustainable excellence instead of chasing temporary motivation. That mindset shift alone puts you ahead of 90% of people who never graduate from amateur tactics to professional systems. Once you understand this connection, everything changes. You stop fighting against your biology and start working with it. You stop trying to force performance and start creating conditions where excellence is inevitable. You stop managing symptoms and start optimizing root causes. You're about to learn the advanced energy protocols that form the foundation of legendary performance. Your energy isn't just about feeling tired or alert. It's the foundation that determines whether you're capable of sustained excellence or destined for mediocre performance. Champions understand that energy optimization isn't about drinking more coffee or getting more sleep. It's about understanding and optimizing the 4 distinct energy systems that determine your capacity for legendary performance. Most people think energy is simple. You have it or you don't. But that's amateur thinking. Energy is actually a complex interplay of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual systems. When these systems are optimized and integrated, you don't just feel more energetic. You operate with the sustained excellence that separates champions from everyone else. Here's what most people never discover. Your energy capacity is largely determined by the efficiency of your cellular powerhouses. your mitochondria. These microscopic structures in every cell of your body are responsible for converting nutrients into usable energy. The average person has mitochondria that operate at maybe 60% efficiency. Champions systematically optimize their mitochondria to operate at 90% or higher efficiency. This isn't a small difference. It's the difference between having a sports car engine versus a lawnmower engine powering your performance. You're about to learn what most people never discover: how to generate, preserve, and amplify energy at levels that make peak performance inevitable rather than accidental. This isn't about temporary energy boosts. This is about building energy architecture that sustains legendary performance for decades. The first thing you need to understand is that energy depletion follows predictable patterns. Your energy doesn't randomly disappear. It gets drained through specific identifiable pathways. Champions identify these pathways and systematically close them. Energy vampires aren't just people. They're habits, environments, foods, thoughts, and activities that consistently drain your energy without providing proportional value. Here's a framework champions use to audit their energy. Every interaction, every food choice, every environment, every thought pattern either gives you energy or takes energy. There's no neutral. Champions become ruthlessly aware of which inputs enhance their energy and which inputs drain it. They then systematically eliminate energy drains and amplify energy gains. Your physical energy isn't just about fitness. It's about optimizing the biological systems that generate cellular energy and determine your capacity for sustained performance. Champions understand that the body is a machine, and like any machine, it performs based on how well it's engineered and maintained. The foundation of physical energy is mitochondrial optimization. Mitochondria are the power plants of your cells, and their efficiency determines whether you have sustained energy for hours or crash after 90 minutes. Most people unknowingly damage their mitochondria through poor nutrition, inadequate recovery, and chronic stress. Champions systematically optimize mitochondrial function through specific protocols that multiply their energy output. Here's what changes everything. Mitochondria respond to stress by becoming more efficient, but only if the stress is followed by adequate recovery. This is called hormetic stress, controlled challenge that strengthens the system. Champions use cold exposure, intermittent fasting, and high-intensity exercise in precise doses to force mitochondrial adaptation. They don't just exercise randomly. They stress their system strategically to build energy capacity. Let me give you the exact cold exposure protocol that champions use. Start with 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your shower. The water should be uncomfortable but not painful, around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Focus on controlling your breathing rather than fighting the cold. Gradually increase duration by 15 seconds every 3 days until you reach 3 minutes. This protocol forces your mitochondria to become more efficient at generating heat, which translates to more efficient energy production throughout the day. The nutrition component is where most people fail catastrophically. They eat for taste or convenience instead of optimizing for cellular energy production. Champions understand that every meal either supports or sabotages mitochondrial function. They prioritize nutrient density over caloric restriction. They time their eating to support circadian rhythms. They understand which foods generate sustained energy and which create energy spikes, followed by crashes. Here's the energy nutrition protocol. Eat your largest meal when your cortisol is highest, typically between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. This aligns your food intake with your natural energy rhythm. Focus on foods that support mitochondrial function. Wild-caught fish for omega-3 fatty acids, grass-fed meat for CoQ10, leafy greens for magnesium, and berries for antioxidants. Avoid foods that damage mitochondria, processed sugars, trans fats, and excessive alcohol. But here's the advanced strategy most people never learn. Energy isn't just about what you consume. It's about how efficiently you produce and utilize it at the cellular level. Champions optimize their breathing patterns to improve oxygen delivery. They use specific temperature protocols to enhance circulation. They understand how hydration affects cellular function and energy production. The breathing technique that champions use for energy optimization is called box breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts. Repeat for 5 minutes. This optimizes oxygen delivery to your cells and activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which enhances recovery and energy production. Champions do this first thing in the morning and before any high-performance activity. Recovery isn't rest, it's active energy regeneration. Champions design their recovery as precisely as they design their work. They understand that sleep quality matters more than sleep quantity. They know how to use temperature, light, and timing to optimize recovery cycles. They treat recovery as the foundation of future performance, not a break from current effort. Here's the sleep optimization protocol. Your bedroom should be between 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Complete darkness. Use blackout curtains or an eye mask. No screens for 1 hour before bed. If you must use devices, use blue light blocking glasses. Wake up at the same time every day, regardless of when you went to sleep. This trains your circadian rhythm for consistent energy patterns. But here's what separates good from legendary. Champions use strategic napping to multiply their energy capacity. A 20-minute nap between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. can restore 80% of your morning alertness. The key is timing. Sleep for exactly 20 minutes to avoid entering deep sleep phases that create grogginess. Set an alarm and trust it. 20 minutes of strategic sleep can give you 6 hours of enhanced performance. You can implement this immediately. Start tracking your energy levels throughout the day on a scale of 1 to 10 every 2 hours. Notice which foods, activities, and conditions generate sustained energy versus temporary spikes. Begin optimizing one variable at a time: sleep timing, meal composition, or movement patterns. Your body is designed for legendary energy production. You just need to remove the obstacles and optimize the inputs. When you've optimized this level, you'll feel the difference immediately. Sustained energy throughout the day without artificial stimulants, natural alertness that doesn't crash, physical resilience that supports mental performance instead of limiting it. You're now operating at a level most people never reach because they never understand that physical energy is the foundation everything else builds on. Your mental energy is finite, precious, and determines whether you can sustain cognitive performance or fade into mental mediocrity. Champions understand that mental energy isn't just about intelligence. It's about cognitive efficiency. It's about organizing your mental resources so precisely that you can think clearly for hours, while others burn out after minutes. Think of your mental energy like a smartphone battery. Most people drain their battery by running dozens of apps simultaneously, having maximum screen brightness, and never closing background processes. Champions optimize their cognitive systems like a master technician. They eliminate unnecessary processes, optimize the essential functions, and design their mental environment for maximum efficiency. The first principle of mental energy management is cognitive load theory. Your brain has limited processing capacity, and every decision, every context switch, every unresolved concern consumes mental energy. Most people unknowingly overwhelm their cognitive capacity by trying to hold too much information simultaneously. Champions systematically reduce cognitive load to preserve mental energy for high-value thinking. Here's exactly how cognitive overload destroys performance. Your working memory can only hold about 4 pieces of information simultaneously. When you exceed this capacity, your brain starts dumping information or making errors. Most people try to juggle 12 different concerns while attempting complex cognitive work. It's like trying to solve calculus problems while someone shouts random numbers in your ear. Champions protect their cognitive workspace like a sacred space. Decision fatigue is the silent killer of mental performance. Every choice you make, regardless of importance, depletes the same mental energy reservoir. Champions eliminate trivial decisions through automation and systems. They decide once and implement repeatedly. They understand that preserving decision-making energy for important choices is more valuable than optimizing every minor detail. Here's the decision management protocol champions use. First, they identify all the recurring decisions in their day: what to wear, what to eat, which route to take, when to check email. Then they create rules or systems that eliminate these decisions. Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day not because he lacked creativity, but because he understood that decision fatigue was real, and every trivial choice was stealing energy from important innovations. Here's what separates champions from everyone else. They understand the energy cost of context switching. Every time you shift from one type of thinking to another, your brain needs time to recalibrate. Most people switch contexts constantly throughout the day, never allowing their brain to settle into deep cognitive flow. Champions batch similar tasks, minimize interruptions, and design their work environment to support sustained cognitive performance. The context switching cost is measurable and devastating. Research shows that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully refocus after an interruption. Most people get interrupted every 11 minutes, which means they never achieve full cognitive engagement with anything. Champions protect their deep work time like guards protect a vault, with multiple layers of security and zero tolerance for intrusion. But the advanced strategy is mental energy budgeting. Champions allocate their cognitive resources as carefully as they allocate financial resources. They schedule their most demanding cognitive work during their peak mental energy hours. They protect their mental energy through ruthless prioritization. They understand that saying no to good opportunities preserves energy for great opportunities. Here's how to identify your peak mental energy hours. Track your cognitive performance every 2 hours for 1 week. Rate your mental clarity, processing speed, and creative thinking on a scale of 1 to 10. Most people discover they have 2 peak periods, one in the morning, typically 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., and one in the afternoon, typically 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., 4 p.m. Champions schedule their most cognitively demanding work during these windows and protect them ruthlessly. Memory optimization is a force multiplier for mental energy. When you have to constantly retrieve information from memory or search for resources, you're burning cognitive fuel on administrative tasks instead of creative thinking. Champions build external memory systems that store information reliably so their brain can focus on processing rather than storage. They understand that the goal isn't to remember everything, it's to access everything efficiently. The external memory system champions use is called second brain methodology. Every piece of important information gets captured in a searchable external system: digital notes, project management tools, or reference databases. The key is having one trusted system where everything goes. With consistent organization and reliable search functions, this frees your biological brain to focus on thinking rather than remembering. The most powerful mental energy strategy is attention architecture. Champions design their physical and digital environment to support sustained focus rather than fragment attention. They eliminate notification interruptions during deep work. They create visual cues that support cognitive flow. They understand that willpower is finite, but systems can make focus automatic. Here's the attention architecture protocol. Create a dedicated space for deep cognitive work that has no distractions, no phone, no internet access, no interruptions. Use visual cues to signal deep work mode. Noise-canceling headphones, a specific lighting setup, or a do not disturb sign. Train the people around you to respect these signals. Start with 25-minute deep work blocks, and gradually extend the duration as your attention stamina improves. But here's the advanced technique most people never learn: cognitive load cycling. Just like physical muscles need recovery between intense efforts, your cognitive systems need recovery between demanding mental work. Champions alternate between high cognitive load tasks and low cognitive load tasks throughout the day. They understand that sustained mental performance requires strategic recovery, not continuous grinding. The cognitive recovery protocol works like this. After 90 minutes of intense cognitive work, take a 15-minute break that involves physical movement, preferably outdoors. This activates your default mode network, which consolidates learning and generates insights. Avoid any digital stimulation during these breaks. No phones, no social media, no email. The goal is to give your prefrontal cortex complete rest so it can return to peak performance. You can start optimizing immediately. Eliminate one category of trivial decisions through automation. Batch similar cognitive tasks together. Create a dedicated environment for your most important thinking. Track when your mental energy is highest and lowest throughout the day. Your brain has incredible capacity for sustained cognitive performance. You just need to stop wasting mental energy on inefficient processes. You're developing elite-level cognitive efficiency. You understand that mental energy isn't about thinking harder. It's about thinking smarter. You're learning to preserve and direct your cognitive resources like a master strategist, rather than burning them randomly like an amateur. This level of mental energy optimization puts you in the top 5% of performers who understand that cognitive efficiency is the ultimate competitive advantage. Your emotional state doesn't just affect how you feel. It determines the quality of every decision you make, every relationship you build, and every challenge you face. Champions understand that emotional energy is the most powerful and most overlooked component of peak performance. When your emotional energy is optimized, you don't just feel better, you think more clearly, act more decisively, and perform at levels that seem effortless. Most people burn enormous amounts of energy on unprocessed emotions. They carry yesterday's stress into today's challenges. They react emotionally to situations that require strategic thinking. They allow other people's emotional states to destabilize their own performance. This creates a constant energy drain that makes sustained excellence impossible. Here's what most people don't understand. Emotions are literally energy in motion. The word emotion comes from the Latin emotere, which means to move out or to move through. When emotions get stuck or suppressed, they create energy blockages that affect your entire system. Champions understand that emotional energy flows when emotions are processed and gets trapped when emotions are avoided. Think about the last time you had an unresolved conflict with someone important to you. Notice how much mental energy it consumed, constantly thinking about what you should have said, replaying scenarios, feeling tension in your body. That's emotional energy that's trapped instead of flowing. Champions process emotions immediately, so their energy can be channeled toward performance instead of being drained by unresolved emotional states. Here's what changes everything. Emotions are information, not instructions. Champions learn to read emotional data without being controlled by emotional impulses. They understand that feeling frustrated doesn't mean the situation is hopeless. It means they care about the outcome and need to adjust their approach. They use emotional information to improve decision-making rather than allowing emotions to override rational thinking. The amateur approach is to either suppress emotions or be completely controlled by them. Champions take a third path. They feel emotions fully, but respond strategically. They experience anger, but channel it into determination. They feel fear, but convert it into preparation. They don't eliminate negative emotions. They transform them into performance fuel. The foundation of emotional energy optimization is emotional granularity, the ability to identify and understand specific emotions, rather than experiencing vague emotional confusion. Most people operate with emotional vocabulary limited to good or bad, stressed or fine. Champions develop precise emotional awareness that allows them to address specific emotional needs rather than managing general emotional chaos. Here's the emotional granularity exercise that champions use. Instead of saying, "I feel bad," identify the specific emotion. Am I disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, or angry? Each emotion has different causes and requires different responses. Disappointment might need acceptance and goal adjustment. Frustration might need problem solving and action. Overwhelm might need prioritization and delegation. Anxiety might need preparation and perspective. When you can identify emotions precisely, you can respond to them effectively. But here's the advanced strategy. Emotional energy can be generated, not just preserved. Champions use specific techniques to create positive emotional states that amplify performance. They understand how gratitude affects neuroplasticity. They know how to use visualization to generate confidence and motivation. They use social connection strategically to enhance emotional resilience. The gratitude protocol that champions use is specific and powerful. Every morning, identify 3 specific things you're grateful for and why you're grateful for them. The key is specificity. Instead of, "I'm grateful for my family," say, "I'm grateful for my partner's ability to make me laugh when I'm stressed, because it reminds me that challenges are temporary, but joy is always available." This specificity activates different neural pathways and creates stronger positive emotional states. Emotional regulation isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about optimizing emotional responses for maximum effectiveness. Champions feel emotions fully, but express them strategically. They experience anger, but channel it into determination. They feel fear, but convert it into preparation. They don't eliminate negative emotions. They transform them into performance fuel. Here's the emotional transformation technique. When you experience a negative emotion, ask yourself 3 questions. What is this emotion telling me? What action does this emotion want me to take? How can I channel this emotional energy toward my goals? For example, frustration tells you that something important isn't working. The action it wants is problem solving. You can channel frustration into focused determination to find solutions. The most powerful emotional strategy is emotional contagion management. Emotions are literally contagious. You unconsciously mirror the emotional states of people around you. Research shows that you can catch emotions from others within milliseconds of exposure. Champions curate their social environment to support optimal emotional states. They limit exposure to energy vampires. They seek out people who elevate their emotional energy. They understand that protecting their emotional state is protecting their performance capacity. Here's the emotional environment audit. List the 5 people you spend the most time with. After each interaction with these people, rate your energy level on a scale of 1 to 10. People who consistently drain your energy below your baseline are energy vampires. People who consistently elevate your energy above your baseline are energy amplifiers. Champions systematically increase time with amplifiers and decrease time with vampires. Stress inoculation is the ultimate emotional energy strategy. Champions deliberately expose themselves to controlled stress to build emotional resilience. They practice difficult conversations in low-stakes situations. They simulate high-pressure scenarios to build confidence. They understand that emotional strength, like physical strength, grows through progressive overload. The stress inoculation protocol works like this. Identify a type of situation that typically creates emotional stress for you: public speaking, difficult conversations, or high-pressure deadlines. Create a low-stakes version of this situation to practice in. For public speaking, start by recording yourself giving a presentation. For difficult conversations, practice with a trusted friend. For high-pressure deadlines, create artificial deadlines for less important projects. Gradually increase the stakes as your emotional resilience improves. But here's the advanced technique that separates good from legendary: emotional energy recycling. Champions have learned to convert negative emotional experiences into positive emotional fuel. They use setbacks as motivation, criticism as information for improvement, and failure as data for better strategies. They don't just recover from negative emotions, they use negative emotions to become stronger. The emotional recycling process has 4 steps. First, feel the negative emotion fully without judgment. Second, extract the information the emotion is providing. Third, identify what action the emotion is calling for. Fourth, channel the emotional energy toward that action. For example, if you feel embarrassed after making a mistake, feel the embarrassment fully. Extract the information that you care about doing quality work. Identify that the action needed is skill improvement. Then channel the emotional energy toward deliberate practice. You can begin optimizing immediately. Start labeling emotions specifically instead of using general terms. Notice which people, environments, and activities enhance versus drain your emotional energy. Practice feeling emotions without immediately acting on them. Build one stress inoculation practice into your routine. Your emotional system is designed for incredible resilience and power. You just need to train it systematically. When you've mastered this level, emotional volatility becomes emotional stability. Stress becomes fuel for performance. Difficult situations become opportunities to demonstrate mastery. You now possess emotional tools most people never develop because they never realize that emotions can be optimized like any other performance system. The compound effect of emotional energy optimization is extraordinary. When your emotions amplify your energy instead of draining it, when they sharpen your focus instead of scattering it, when they fuel your decisions instead of sabotaging them, you operate in a completely different category of performance. You're not just managing emotions. You're using emotions as rocket fuel for exceptional achievement. Now that your energy is optimized across all systems, you're ready for focus mastery. You have the foundation that makes sustained attention possible. You understand that focus isn't about willpower. It's about creating conditions where concentration becomes inevitable. Your ability to control your attention determines everything else about your performance. In a world designed to fragment focus, champions who master attention control don't just outperform everyone else. They operate in a completely different category. You're about to learn why attention is the ultimate competitive advantage and how to develop focus that makes legendary performance inevitable. Most people think focus is about concentration, but that's beginner thinking. True focus mastery is about attention architecture, designing your cognitive environment so precisely that distraction becomes impossible and deep work becomes automatic. Champions don't fight distraction, they eliminate it. They don't force focus, they create conditions where sustained attention is the natural outcome. Here's what most people don't understand. Your attention is under constant assault. The average person receives 121 emails per day, checks their phone 96 times, and gets interrupted every 11 minutes. Your brain is being hijacked by systems designed to capture and monetize your attention. Every notification, every ping, every flash of color on a screen is engineered by teams of neuroscientists and behavioral economists to fragment your focus and steal your cognitive capacity. You already have the capacity for legendary focus. Your brain is designed for sustained attention far beyond what most people ever experience. The problem isn't your natural ability. It's the systems you use to direct and protect that ability. You're about to learn the attention control protocols that separate champions from everyone else. Your brain has 2 primary attention networks, the focused attention network and the default mode network. Understanding how these systems work is the difference between struggling with concentration and achieving legendary focus. Champions optimize both networks to create attention on demand. The focused attention network is what most people think of as concentration, the ability to direct cognitive resources toward a specific task. But here's what changes everything. This network has limited capacity and depletes with use. Most people burn through their focused attention capacity on trivial tasks, then wonder why they can't concentrate when it matters. Champions preserve focused attention for high-value work through strategic attention allocation. Here's how attention depletion actually works. Every time you consciously direct your attention, you're using glucose in your prefrontal cortex. This glucose is finite. When it's depleted, your ability to maintain focus crashes. Most people unknowingly burn through their attention glucose on low-value activities, checking social media, reading random articles, engaging with notifications. Champions protect their attention glucose like a precious resource. The default mode network is your brain's screensaver. What happens when you're not actively focusing on anything specific? For most people, the default mode network creates mental chatter, worry, and distraction. But champions train their default mode network to support rather than sabotage focused attention. They understand that what happens between focused work sessions determines the quality of the next focus session. Here's the default mode network training protocol. During breaks between focused work, instead of checking your phone or consuming random information, engage in activities that support your default mode network: walking, meditation, or simple physical movement. Avoid any digital stimulation. This allows your default mode network to process information, generate insights, and prepare for the next focus session. Here's the breakthrough insight. Legendary focus isn't about forcing concentration harder. It's about eliminating attention resistance. When your environment, habits, and systems are aligned with sustained attention, focus becomes effortless rather than exhausting. Champions create focus through design, not discipline. Attention residue is the hidden focus killer that destroys performance without most people realizing it. Every time you switch from one task to another, part of your attention remains stuck on the previous task. Most people switch contexts constantly throughout the day, creating massive attention fragmentation. Champions understand that true focus requires single tasking, with intentional transitions between different types of work. Here's exactly how attention residue works. When you switch from writing an email to attending a meeting, part of your brain is still processing the email content. When you switch from the meeting to working on a project, part of your brain is still in meeting mode. Each context switch leaves residue that reduces your cognitive capacity for the new task. Research shows that it takes an average of 23 minutes to fully clear attention residue from complex tasks. The attention residue clearing protocol between different types of work take a 2-minute transition period. Close your eyes, take 5 deep breaths, and mentally close the previous task by summarizing what you accomplished and what needs to happen next. Then set a clear intention for the new task before beginning. This clears attention residue and allows you to engage fully with the new activity. But here's the advanced principle. Attention quality matters more than attention duration. Champions train their ability to achieve deep focus quickly, rather than struggling to maintain shallow focus for hours. They understand that 30 minutes of legendary focus produces more value than 3 hours of distracted effort. The attention quality training progression works like this. Start with 10-minute periods of single-task focus with 0 distractions. Gradually increase to 15 minutes, then 20, then 25. Don't advance to the next level until you can maintain complete focus for the current duration. Most people try to jump straight to hour-long focus sessions and fail. Champions build attention stamina gradually, like athletes build physical stamina. Neuroplasticity means your attention capacity can be trained and strengthened like any other skill. Champions use specific attention training protocols to build focus endurance and depth. They practice sustained attention systematically rather than hoping it will improve accidentally. They understand that attention mastery is a skill that compounds over time. The attention training protocol that champions use is called focused attention meditation. Choose a single object of focus, your breath, a word, or a visual point. When your attention wanders, gently redirect it back to the chosen focus. Start with 5 minutes daily and gradually increase duration. This isn't about relaxation. It's about building the neural pathways that control attention. Your brain is designed for incredible focus capacity. You can absolutely learn this because you already understand that attention is a system, not just an ability. You're thinking at a level that makes attention mastery inevitable rather than accidental. The fact that you're still listening to this demonstrates that you have more focus capacity than 90% of people who would have been distracted by now. Deep work isn't just working without distractions. It's designing cognitive architecture that makes sustained, high-value thinking inevitable. Champions understand that deep work is a state that must be engineered through specific environmental, temporal, and cognitive protocols. The foundation of deep work architecture is environmental design. Your physical environment either supports or sabotages sustained attention. Champions create dedicated spaces that automatically trigger focus states. They eliminate visual distractions, optimize lighting and temperature, and design their workspace to support hours of sustained cognitive performance. Here's the environmental design protocol that champions use. Choose one location that is used exclusively for deep work, never for entertainment, casual browsing, or low-value activities. This creates a psychological association between the space and focused attention. Remove all visual distractions from this space. No decorations, no clutter, no movement in your peripheral vision. Set the temperature between 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit for optimal cognitive performance. Use lighting that mimics natural daylight, full-spectrum LED lights, or work near a window. But here's what separates good from legendary. Champions understand that deep work has different depths. Level 1 is basic concentration, working without obvious distractions. Level 2 is sustained focus, maintaining attention for extended periods. Level 3 is cognitive flow, achieving effortless concentration where time disappears. Level 4 is transcendent focus, reaching states where breakthrough insights emerge naturally. Most people never progress beyond level 1 because they don't understand the progression requirements. Each level requires different preparation, different environmental conditions, and different recovery protocols. Champions systematically train their ability to access deeper levels of focus through progressive attention challenges. Here's the deep work progression protocol. Start with level 1, 25 minutes of focused work with minimal distractions. Master this level by completing it successfully for 1 week before advancing. Level 2, extend to 45 minutes while maintaining the same focus quality. Level 3, 90 minutes of sustained focus where you lose track of time. Level 4, 2+ hours where insights and creative solutions emerge spontaneously. Don't skip levels. Each foundation makes the next level possible. The temporal component is crucial. Deep work isn't just about eliminating distractions during work sessions. It's about preparing for deep work through pre-work rituals and recovering from deep work through post-work protocols. Champions understand that deep work is preceded by proper preparation and followed by adequate recovery. The pre-work ritual that champions use is specific and consistent. First, clear your physical workspace of everything except what's needed for the current task. Second, review your objective for the session. What specific outcome are you working toward? Third, eliminate all potential interruptions. Phone in airplane mode, notifications disabled, door closed. Fourth, do 2 minutes of focused breathing to shift into concentration mode. This ritual signals to your brain that it's time for sustained attention. Startup friction is the enemy of deep work. Champions eliminate everything that makes starting difficult. They prepare their workspace in advance. They clarify their objectives before sitting down. They eliminate decision-making during the transition into deep work. They understand that the first 5 minutes determine whether they'll achieve legendary focus or struggle with distraction. Here's the Startup Friction Elimination Protocol. The night before your deep work session, prepare everything you'll need. Documents open, tools ready, clear objective written down. When you sit down to work, you should be able to begin productive work within 30 seconds. Any setup time creates friction that makes it easier to procrastinate or get distracted. Focus stacking is the advanced strategy that multiplies deep work effectiveness. Champions layer complementary focus techniques to create compound concentration. They might combine environmental optimization with attention training, with strategic nutrition timing, with recovery protocols. Each element supports the others to create focus that exceeds the sum of individual techniques. Here's a focus stacking protocol. Environmental optimization, dedicated space, perfect temperature, optimal lighting. Plus physiological preparation, strategic caffeine timing, proper hydration, breath work. Plus cognitive preparation, clear objectives, eliminated distractions, pre-work ritual. Plus attention anchoring, focused meditation before starting. Plus recovery planning, scheduled breaks, post-work protocol. This creates focus conditions that make sustained attention almost inevitable. The most powerful deep work strategy is attention momentum. Champions understand that focus builds on itself when properly managed. They start with shorter, easier focus sessions to build attention confidence. They gradually extend duration and increase cognitive difficulty. They create positive feedback loops that make each focus session easier than the last. The attention momentum protocol works like this. Week 1, 25 minutes of deep work on familiar tasks. Week 2, 35 minutes on familiar tasks. Week 3, 45 minutes on familiar tasks. Week 4, 45 minutes on moderately challenging tasks. Week 5, 60 minutes on moderately challenging tasks. Continue this progression, increasing either duration or difficulty, but never both simultaneously, until you can sustain 2+ hours of deep focus on complex tasks. But here's the advanced technique that separates champions from everyone else. They understand that different types of cognitive work require different focus strategies. Creative work requires a different focus approach than analytical work. Problem solving requires different attention patterns than execution. Champions match their focus strategy to the type of cognitive work they're doing. For creative work, champions use diffuse focus, allowing their attention to wander slightly while maintaining general direction toward the creative challenge. For analytical work, they use concentrated focus, laser-like attention on specific details. For problem solving, they alternate between focused analysis and relaxed reflection. For execution, they use sustained focus with regular progress checkpoints. You can start implementing immediately. Create one dedicated space for your most important cognitive work. Eliminate obvious distractions and optimize basic environmental factors. Design a 5-minute pre-work ritual that consistently prepares you for focus. Practice sustaining attention for gradually longer periods. Your brain is designed for incredible focus capacity. You just need to create the right conditions. You're developing elite-level attention control. You understand that deep work isn't about trying harder. It's about designing better. You're creating systems that make legendary focus inevitable rather than accidental. This level of focus mastery puts you in the top 1% of performers who can sustain deep cognitive work in a world designed to fragment attention. Distractions don't just interrupt your current work. They fragment your attention, reduce cognitive capacity, and make sustained excellence impossible. Champions understand that managing distractions isn't about willpower. It's about creating systems that make distraction impossible and focus automatic. The first principle of distraction elimination is proactive versus reactive management. Most people wait until they're distracted, then try to refocus. Champions eliminate potential distractions before they begin working. They understand that preventing distraction is exponentially easier than recovering from distraction. Here's what changes everything. Most distractions aren't external. They're internal. The buzzing phone gets attention, but the anxious thought about tomorrow's deadline creates hours of attention fragmentation. Champions address internal distractions through cognitive hygiene rather than environmental control alone. Digital distraction is the modern performance killer. Champions don't just turn off notifications. They architect their digital environment to support sustained attention. They use specific apps, browser settings, and device configurations that make focus automatic and distraction difficult. They understand that their relationship with technology determines their capacity for deep work. But here's the advanced strategy: distraction inoculation. Champions deliberately expose themselves to controlled distractions while maintaining focus to build attention resilience. They practice sustaining concentration in progressively more challenging environments. They understand that attention strength, like physical strength, grows through progressive resistance training. The most powerful distraction elimination technique is attention firewall systems. Champions create multiple layers of protection around their focused attention. They have environmental barriers, technological barriers, social barriers, and cognitive barriers. They understand that attention is too valuable to protect with single point of failure systems. Social distraction management is often overlooked, but incredibly important. Champions train the people around them to respect focused work time. They communicate their attention needs clearly. They create social systems that support, rather than sabotage, sustained focus. They understand that protecting attention often requires protecting boundaries. Emergency attention recovery protocols are essential because distractions will occasionally break through even the best systems. Champions have specific techniques for quickly returning to focused attention after interruption. They don't waste energy feeling guilty about distraction. They efficiently redirect attention back to important work. The ultimate distraction elimination strategy is making focus more attractive than distraction. Champions create positive associations with sustained attention. They celebrate focus achievements. They track and measure attention improvements. They understand that attention mastery becomes sustainable when it's intrinsically rewarding rather than externally imposed. You can begin implementing immediately. Identify your 3 most common distractions and create specific systems to eliminate each one. Design your digital environment to support focus rather than fragment attention. Practice recovering quickly when distractions break through your systems. Build one attention challenge into your routine to strengthen focus resilience. You now control your attention like a world-class performer. You understand that distraction elimination isn't about perfection. It's about creating systems that make focus the path of least resistance. You've developed attention architecture that supports legendary performance rather than sabotages it. With your energy optimized and your focus mastered, you're ready for emotional mastery. You have the foundation that makes emotional regulation possible and the attention capacity that makes emotional skills trainable. Your emotional state determines the quality of every decision you make, every relationship you build, and every challenge you overcome. Champions understand that emotions aren't obstacles to performance. They're the fuel that powers legendary achievement when properly understood and optimized. You're about to learn why emotional mastery is the secret weapon that separates good performers from legendary ones. Most people are controlled by their emotions instead of controlling them. They react automatically to emotional triggers. They make important decisions while emotionally activated. They allow other people's emotional states to destabilize their own performance. This creates inconsistent results and prevents sustained excellence. Champions operate from a completely different framework. They experience emotions fully, but respond strategically. They use emotional information to improve decision-making rather than allowing emotions to override rational thinking. They generate positive emotional states that amplify performance and transform negative emotions into competitive advantages. You're about to master emotional skills that most people never develop because they never realize emotions can be optimized like any other performance system. Your emotions aren't random feelings that happen to you. They're sophisticated information processing systems that evolved to help you navigate complex environments. Champions understand that emotions are data, not directives. They read emotional information accurately and respond strategically rather than reacting automatically. The foundation of emotional mastery is understanding the difference between emotions and feelings. Emotions are biological responses that occur automatically based on your brain's interpretation of current circumstances. Feelings are your conscious experience and interpretation of those emotional responses. Champions master the gap between automatic emotional responses and conscious emotional choices. Here's what changes everything. You can't control which emotions arise, but you can absolutely control how you respond to them. Most people think emotional regulation means suppressing negative emotions, but that's amateur thinking. True emotional mastery is experiencing emotions fully while choosing responses strategically. The amygdala hijack is the enemy of peak performance. When your brain perceives threat, the amygdala triggers fight or flight responses that override rational thinking. Most people get hijacked multiple times daily by situations that aren't actually threatening. Difficult emails, challenging conversations, or unexpected problems. Champions train their ability to maintain cognitive control during emotional activation. Emotional granularity is the foundation of emotional intelligence. Most people operate with limited emotional vocabulary: happy, sad, angry, stressed. Champions develop precise emotional awareness that allows them to identify specific emotions and address specific emotional needs. When you can distinguish between frustration, disappointment, and overwhelm, you can respond to each emotion appropriately. But here's the advanced principle. Emotions are contagious. You unconsciously mirror the emotional states of people around you. Champions curate their social environment strategically to support optimal emotional states. They limit exposure to energy vampires and seek out people who elevate their emotional energy. The most powerful emotional skill is emotional flexibility, the ability to access different emotional states as situations require. Champions can generate confidence for presentations, compassion for difficult conversations, and determination for challenging projects. They don't wait for emotions to arise naturally. They create emotions strategically. You understand emotions at a deeper level than 99% of people because you see them as systems rather than random experiences. You're ready to learn how emotions can be engineered to support legendary performance rather than sabotage it. Peak states aren't accidental moments of exceptional performance. They're specific neurobiological conditions that can be created systematically. Champions understand the physiology of peak performance and use specific techniques to access flow states, confidence, and optimal emotional conditions on demand. Flow states represent the pinnacle of emotional optimization for performance. During flow, challenge and skill are perfectly matched. Self-consciousness disappears, and performance becomes effortless. Most people experience flow occasionally by accident. Champions create flow conditions systematically through environmental design, challenge calibration, and attention management. Here's what separates good from legendary. Champions understand that flow has prerequisites. You can't force flow, but you can create conditions where flow becomes probable. Clear objectives, immediate feedback, minimized distractions, optimal challenge levels, and complete presence all increase flow probability. The physiology of peak performance is precise and trainable. Champions understand how breathing patterns affect emotional states. They know how posture influences confidence. They use temperature, movement, and visualization to create optimal neurobiological conditions for performance. They don't hope for peak states. They engineer them. State stacking is the advanced technique that multiplies emotional effectiveness. Champions layer complementary emotional states to create compound performance advantages. They might combine confidence with curiosity, determination with flexibility, or focus with creativity. Each emotional state supports the others to create performance that exceeds individual emotional contributions. Rapid state change is the skill that makes emotional mastery practical. Champions can shift from frustration to determination, from anxiety to excitement, from overwhelm to clarity within minutes. They have specific protocols for emotional transitions that don't require hours of meditation or therapy. They need techniques that work in real-world, high-pressure situations. Emotional anchoring allows champions to access peak states instantly. They create specific physical cues, mental triggers, or environmental conditions that automatically generate optimal emotional states. They understand that peak performance isn't about waiting for inspiration. It's about creating reliable access to exceptional states. The most powerful state engineering technique is emotional momentum. Champions understand that emotional states build on themselves when properly managed. They start with easier emotional victories to build confidence. They gradually tackle more challenging emotional situations. They create positive feedback loops that make each emotional challenge easier than the last. You're learning what takes performers years to discover because you understand that emotions can be optimized systematically rather than hoped for accidentally. You're developing emotional skills that most people never realize are possible. Resilience isn't just bouncing back from setbacks. It's developing the capacity to grow stronger through challenge. Champions understand that adversity isn't something to survive. It's something to leverage for accelerated development. They don't just recover from difficulties. They use difficulties to upgrade their emotional operating system. The foundation of emotional resilience is stress inoculation. Champions deliberately expose themselves to controlled stress to build emotional strength. They practice difficult conversations in low-stakes situations. They simulate high-pressure scenarios to build confidence. They understand that emotional strength, like physical strength, grows through progressive overload. Here's what changes everything. Champions reframe adversity as training rather than punishment. They see setbacks as information about system improvements rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. They understand that every emotional challenge is an opportunity to strengthen emotional capacity for future challenges. Anti-fragility goes beyond resilience. It's the ability to gain from disorder rather than just survive it. Champions develop emotional systems that actually improve under stress. They use pressure to clarify priorities. They use criticism to identify improvement opportunities. They use failure to build emotional resilience for bigger challenges. Emotional armor isn't about becoming emotionally numb. It's about developing emotional protection that allows you to remain open and responsive while maintaining core stability. Champions feel emotions fully, but don't allow temporary emotional states to destabilize their fundamental confidence and direction. The most powerful resilience strategy is adversity advantage, the systematic process of converting setbacks into competitive advantages. Champions extract lessons from every difficult experience. They build emotional skills through challenge navigation. They develop confidence through overcoming progressively more difficult obstacles. Stress inoculation protocols are specific and progressive. Champions start with manageable challenges and gradually increase emotional difficulty. They might practice public speaking in low-stakes environments before important presentations. They might have difficult conversations with supportive people before addressing high-stakes conflicts. Emotional recovery is as important as emotional strength. Champions understand that resilience requires recovery cycles, just like physical training. They have specific protocols for emotional restoration after challenging periods. They understand that emotional sustainability requires balancing challenge with recovery. The ultimate resilience technique is turning emotional pain into emotional power. Champions don't avoid negative emotions. They transform them into fuel for exceptional performance. They convert frustration into determination, disappointment into motivation, and fear into preparation energy. You now possess emotional tools most people never develop because they never realize that emotional resilience can be trained systematically. You understand that adversity isn't something that happens to you. It's something you use to become stronger. With your energy optimized, your focus mastered, and your emotions regulated, you're ready to integrate all three systems for unstoppable performance. You have the individual components that combine to create legendary excellence. You've mastered the individual systems: energy optimization, focus control, and emotional regulation. Now you're ready for the advanced protocols that combine all three into unstoppable performance architecture. This is where good performers become legendary, where separate skills become integrated excellence, where peak performance transforms from occasional accident to inevitable outcome. Integration isn't just using all three systems, it's orchestrating them strategically, so each system amplifies the others. Champions understand that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts when energy, focus, and emotions are properly sequenced and synchronized. You're ready for this because you understand each component individually. You've built the foundation that makes integration possible rather than overwhelming. You're about to learn how to combine these systems for performance that exceeds what any individual system could create alone. The performance stack isn't just using energy, focus, and emotions simultaneously. It's sequencing them strategically so each system enhances the next. Champions understand that there's an optimal order for activating these systems that creates compound performance advantages. The sequence starts with energy optimization because energy is the foundation everything else builds on. You can't sustain focus without adequate energy. You can't regulate emotions when you're running on empty. Champions begin every high-performance session by ensuring their energy systems are optimized and aligned. Physical energy provides the biological foundation for cognitive performance. Mental energy creates the capacity for sustained thinking. Emotional energy supplies the motivation and drive for exceptional effort. When all three energy systems are optimized and aligned, you have the foundation for legendary performance. Focus activation comes second because directed attention channels energy toward high-value outcomes. Unfocused energy creates activity without accomplishment. Focused energy creates laser-like concentration that cuts through complexity and confusion. Champions use optimized energy to fuel sustained, deep focus rather than scattered, shallow attention. Here's what separates good from legendary. Champions understand that focus has different requirements at different energy levels. When energy is high, they tackle complex cognitive challenges. When energy is moderate, they handle important but less demanding tasks. When energy is low, they focus on recovery and restoration rather than forcing performance. Emotional regulation comes third because stable emotions provide the context for sustainable excellence. Emotional volatility destabilizes energy and fragments focus. Emotional stability amplifies both energy efficiency and focus quality. Champions use optimized energy and focused attention to create and maintain optimal emotional states. But here's the advanced integration principle. Once all three systems are optimized individually, they begin to reinforce each other automatically. Stable emotions enhance energy efficiency. Sustained focus improves emotional regulation. Optimized energy makes both focus and emotional control easier. The integration multiplier effect means that combined systems create performance that exceeds the sum of individual contributions. When energy, focus, and emotions are perfectly aligned, champions don't just perform better. They operate in a completely different category where excellence feels effortless and sustainable. You're ready for the complete performance protocol because you understand the architecture now. You see how individual mastery, leads to integrated excellence. You're operating with systems most people never develop because they never progress beyond amateur approaches to professional integration. Legendary performance isn't created through occasional moments of excellence. It's built through daily rituals that consistently optimize and integrate your performance systems. Champions understand that what you do every day matters more than what you do occasionally. They design daily rituals that make peak performance inevitable rather than accidental. Morning ignition sequences set the foundation for the entire day. Champions don't start their day reactively by checking messages or rushing into activity. They begin with intentional protocols that optimize energy, prime focus, and establish optimal emotional states. The first hour determines whether you'll operate at peak capacity or struggle with suboptimal performance all day. The optimal morning sequence follows the performance stack. Energy optimization first, focus preparation second, emotional priming third. Champions might start with movement or breathing exercises to activate physical energy, followed by clarity practices to prepare mental focus, concluded with visualization or gratitude practices to establish optimal emotional states. But here's what separates amateur routines from professional systems. Champions customize their morning rituals based on the day's specific performance requirements. A day requiring creative thinking gets different preparation than a day focused on execution. A day with difficult conversations requires different emotional preparation than a day of solo deep work. Performance maintenance throughout the day prevents energy depletion, focus fragmentation, and emotional volatility. Champions don't just optimize their systems once in the morning. They maintain optimization through strategic interventions throughout the day. They have specific protocols for energy renewal, attention restoration, and emotional recalibration. Transition rituals are the hidden key to sustained performance. Champions don't move randomly from one activity to another. They have specific protocols for shifting between different types of work. They understand that transition quality determines whether the next activity starts with full capacity or diminished resources. Energy renewal practices prevent the gradual depletion that makes afternoon performance crash inevitable. Champions use specific breathing techniques, movement patterns, nutrition timing, and hydration protocols to maintain energy levels throughout the day. They understand that energy management is more important than energy generation. Focus restoration techniques combat the attention residue that fragments cognitive performance. Champions have specific practices for clearing mental clutter between tasks, resetting attention after interruptions, and preparing for deep work sessions. They understand that attention quality matters more than attention duration. Emotional recalibration prevents the emotional accumulation that creates volatility and poor decision-making. Champions have techniques for processing emotions throughout the day rather than allowing them to accumulate. They understand that emotional hygiene is as important as physical hygiene for sustained performance. Evening optimization sequences prepare for recovery and set up the next day's performance potential. Champions don't just stop working. They have intentional protocols for transitioning from performance to recovery, processing the day's experiences, and preparing for optimal sleep quality. You can start implementing immediately. Design one simple morning ritual that optimizes energy, focus, and emotions in sequence. Create one transition practice for moving between different types of work. Develop one evening protocol for optimal recovery preparation. Your daily rituals will determine your long-term performance capacity more than any other factor. You're operating with systems most people never develop because they react to each day rather than designing each day for optimal performance. Even with optimized systems, performance issues will occasionally arise. Champions understand that troubleshooting performance problems isn't about forcing solutions. It's about diagnosing which system is suboptimal and applying the appropriate intervention. They have specific protocols for the most common performance disruptions. When energy is high but focus is scattered, The problem is usually attention management rather than energy depletion. Champions use specific focus restoration techniques, environmental optimization, attention anchoring practices, or cognitive load reduction. They don't try to generate more energy. They channel existing energy more effectively. When focus is sharp, but emotions are volatile, the issue is usually emotional regulation rather than concentration capacity. Champions use emotional stabilization techniques, breathing patterns, physical movement, or cognitive reframing. They don't try to force emotional suppression. They create conditions for emotional stability. When emotions are stable but energy is low, the problem is usually energy system optimization rather than emotional or focus issues. Champions use energy restoration protocols, strategic nutrition, movement activation, or recovery intensification. They understand that trying to force performance without adequate energy creates unsustainable outcomes. Here's what separates amateur troubleshooting from professional diagnostics. Champions identify root causes rather than treating symptoms. Low focus might be caused by energy depletion, emotional volatility, or environmental distraction. Each cause requires different interventions. Champions diagnose accurately before applying solutions. The most common performance issue is system overwhelm, trying to optimize everything simultaneously instead of addressing the primary limiting factor. Champions identify which single system needs attention and focus their intervention energy there. They understand that fixing one system often resolves issues in other systems automatically. Emergency performance recovery protocols address acute performance disruptions when immediate excellence is required despite suboptimal conditions. Champions have specific techniques for rapid energy activation, instant focus enhancement, and immediate emotional optimization. These aren't sustainable long-term strategies, but they're essential for high-stakes situations. Real-time performance adjustment is the advanced skill that allows champions to modify their approach during performance rather than waiting for breaks or recovery periods. They can recognize performance degradation as it's happening and make immediate micro-adjustments to restore optimal functioning. Performance pattern recognition helps champions identify recurring issues and address them systematically rather than repeatedly dealing with the same problems. They track which conditions create optimal performance and which conditions create suboptimal performance. They use this data to design better systems rather than hoping for better luck. The ultimate troubleshooting skill is performance flexibility, the ability to maintain excellent outcomes even when optimal conditions aren't available. Champions can perform at high levels despite imperfect energy, less than ideal focus conditions, or challenging emotional circumstances. They have backup systems for their backup systems. You can now diagnose and fix performance issues like a professional because you understand the underlying systems rather than just the surface symptoms. You have the diagnostic skills and intervention tools that separate amateur performers from master practitioners. You're ready for the advanced performance strategies that take integrated mastery to legendary levels. You've built the foundation that makes elite techniques possible rather than overwhelming. You've mastered the fundamentals of energy, focus, and emotional optimization. You've learned to integrate these systems for compound performance advantages. Now you're ready for the elite techniques that separate good performers from legendary ones. These aren't beginner strategies. They're advanced protocols that require the foundation you've built to implement effectively. Champions don't just perform consistently. They perform at levels that seem impossible to others. They sustain excellence over years and decades, while others burn out after months. They continue evolving their performance capacity when others plateau. You're about to learn the advanced strategies that make legendary performance sustainable rather than temporary. These techniques require the mastery foundation you've developed. They build on integrated systems rather than replacing them. They're designed for performers who've graduated from basic optimization to advanced performance architecture. Legendary performers understand that peak performance isn't sustainable continuously. It's created through strategic cycles of intensity and recovery. Performance periodization is the systematic approach to planning performance cycles that maximize long-term capacity while preventing burnout and degradation. The foundation of performance periodization is understanding that your capacity for peak performance is finite in any given time frame. Champions don't try to operate at maximum intensity constantly. They cycle between periods of high-intensity performance and strategic recovery. This approach actually increases peak capacity over time rather than depleting it. Macroperiodization involves planning performance cycles over months and years. Champions identify when peak performance is most critical and design their preparation accordingly. They might intensify their training and optimization protocols leading up to important projects or deadlines, then schedule recovery periods for system restoration and capacity building. Microperiodization applies the same principles to weekly and daily cycles. Champions understand that even within high-performance periods, sustainable excellence requires strategic variation in intensity. They might have high-intensity focus days, followed by moderate-intensity creative days, or demanding morning sessions, followed by restorative afternoon activities. Here's what separates amateur approaches from professional periodization. Champions plan recovery as precisely as they plan performance. Recovery isn't what happens when they're not working. It's active system restoration that prepares for future peak performance. They treat recovery as an essential component of performance architecture, rather than an optional break from effort. The recovery paradox is counterintuitive but essential. Strategic recovery periods actually increase performance capacity, rather than reducing it. When systems are allowed to fully restore, they often return stronger than before. Champions use recovery periods for skill development, system optimization, and capacity building, rather than passive rest. Adaptive periodization means adjusting performance cycles based on real-time feedback, rather than following rigid schedules. Champions monitor their energy, focus, and emotional systems continuously, and modify their intensity accordingly. They understand that optimal periodization responds to actual capacity rather than theoretical planning. The most advanced periodization strategy is performance season design. Champions organize their year around specific performance seasons, each with different objectives and requirements. They might have creation seasons focused on innovation, execution seasons focused on implementation, and restoration seasons focused on system optimization. Performance periodization prevents the plateau effect that stops most people's development. By systematically varying challenge levels, recovery intensity, and focus areas, champions continue developing capacity when others stagnate. They understand that growth requires strategic challenge variation rather than consistent repetition. You can start implementing immediately. Identify your most important performance periods for the next 6 months and design preparation and recovery cycles accordingly. Plan your weekly schedule to include both high-intensity and recovery periods. Track your performance capacity over time to optimize your periodization approach. This is graduate-level performance strategy because you understand that sustainable excellence requires systematic capacity management rather than random effort application. Your environment shapes your performance capacity more than most people realize. Champions understand that peak performance isn't just about internal optimization. It's about designing external conditions that make excellence inevitable rather than effortful. Environmental optimization is the systematic approach to creating physical, digital, and social conditions that automatically enhance performance. Physical environment design goes far beyond eliminating distractions. Champions optimize lighting, temperature, acoustics, air quality, and spatial organization to support specific performance requirements. They understand that their physical environment either enhances or degrades their capacity for sustained excellence. Lighting optimization affects energy, focus, and emotional states simultaneously. Champions use specific lighting conditions to support different types of work: bright, Cool lighting enhances alertness and focus for analytical work. Warm, dim lighting supports creativity and relaxation for recovery periods. Natural light exposure throughout the day optimizes circadian rhythms and energy regulation. Temperature control is a powerful but overlooked performance variable. Champions understand that thermal comfort affects cognitive performance, emotional regulation, and energy efficiency. They use temperature strategically: cooler environments for sustained focus, warmer environments for creative thinking, and temperature variation for attention management. Acoustic environment design eliminates noise pollution and uses sound strategically to enhance performance. Champions might use silence for deep concentration, specific music for creative work, or nature sounds for stress reduction. They understand that auditory environment affects cognitive load and emotional states. Air quality optimization affects cognitive performance directly through oxygen delivery and indirectly through energy levels. Champions ensure adequate ventilation, manage humidity levels, and eliminate air pollutants that can degrade mental performance. They understand that breathing quality determines thinking quality. Digital environment curation is essential in the modern performance landscape. Champions design their digital interfaces, app configurations, and online environments to support focus rather than fragment attention. They eliminate digital clutter, optimize notification systems, and use technology to enhance rather than hinder performance. Social environment curation might be the most important, but most overlooked optimization factor. Champions strategically choose who they spend time with, understanding that social influence affects energy, focus, and emotional states. They limit exposure to energy vampires and seek out people who elevate their performance capacity. The most advanced environmental strategy is context-dependent optimization. Champions create different environmental configurations for different performance requirements. They might have a setup optimized for creative thinking, another for analytical work, and another for difficult conversations. Each environment automatically primes the appropriate performance state. Environmental automation reduces decision fatigue and ensures consistent optimization. Champions use technology, systems, and habits to maintain optimal environmental conditions without conscious effort. They understand that environmental optimization should be automatic rather than effortful. You can begin optimizing immediately. Audit your current environment for factors that enhance versus degrade performance. Optimize one environmental variable, lighting, temperature, or sound, and track the impact on your performance capacity. Design your workspace to automatically support your most important work rather than requiring constant adjustment. This is master-level environmental thinking because you understand that champions create conditions where excellence is inevitable rather than hoping performance will overcome suboptimal circumstances. What gets measured gets optimized. Champions understand that sustainable performance improvement requires systematic measurement and data-driven optimization, rather than hoping effort will lead to improvement. Performance measurement isn't about obsessive tracking. It's about gathering feedback that enables continuous optimization. The foundation of performance measurement is identifying leading indicators rather than just tracking lagging indicators. Most people measure outcomes, how much they accomplished or how well they performed. Champions measure the inputs that create those outcomes: energy quality, focus duration, emotional stability, and system adherence. Energy measurement goes beyond subjective feelings to include objective markers that predict performance capacity. Champions might track sleep quality metrics, heart rate variability, cognitive reaction times, or subjective energy ratings throughout the day. They use this data to optimize their energy systems rather than hoping energy will improve accidentally. Focus measurement includes both duration and quality metrics. Champions track how long they can sustain deep focus, how quickly they can achieve concentrated attention, how well they recover from interruptions, and how their focus capacity changes throughout the day. They use this data to optimize their attention architecture. Emotional measurement involves tracking emotional patterns, triggers, recovery times, and regulation effectiveness. Champions monitor which conditions create optimal emotional states, which situations challenge their emotional stability, and how their emotional capacity changes over time. They use this information to optimize their emotional systems. Here's what separates amateur tracking from professional measurement. Champions focus on actionable metrics that enable optimization rather than vanity metrics that feel good but don't drive improvement. They measure variables they can control and optimize rather than outcomes they can only influence. The most powerful measurement approach is systems tracking rather than outcome tracking. Champions measure how well they execute their energy, focus, and emotional optimization systems rather than just measuring performance results. They understand that consistent system execution creates consistent performance outcomes. Performance analytics involves analyzing measurement data to identify patterns, trends, and optimization opportunities. Champions don't just collect data. They use data to understand what works, what doesn't, and what changes might improve their performance capacity. They treat performance optimization as an ongoing experiment rather than a fixed approach. Continuous optimization means making systematic improvements based on measurement feedback rather than random changes based on speculation. Champions use their performance data to test specific hypotheses about system improvements. They change one variable at a time and measure the impact rather than making multiple changes simultaneously. The ultimate measurement strategy is performance experimentation, using systematic testing to discover optimal approaches rather than assuming current methods are best. Champions treat their performance systems as ongoing experiments, constantly testing modifications and improvements. You can start implementing immediately. Choose one key performance variable to track consistently. Design simple measurement systems that capture useful data without creating excessive overhead. Use your measurement data to make one specific optimization to your performance systems. Focus on measuring what you can control rather than what you can only influence. You're now thinking like a performance scientist rather than just a performance practitioner. You understand that optimization requires feedback loops that enable systematic improvement rather than hoping random effort will create better results. Everything you've learned about energy, focus, and emotional optimization is ultimately about becoming someone who naturally operates at peak performance levels. Skills are important, but identity is everything. Champions don't just perform exceptionally occasionally, they become people for whom excellence is natural, inevitable, and sustainable. Your identity determines your actions more than your knowledge, motivation, or willpower. When you identify as someone who naturally optimizes energy, masters focus, and regulates emotions effectively, these behaviors become automatic rather than effortful. You stop fighting against your nature and start expressing your nature. You're ready for this transformation because you've built the foundation that makes identity change possible. You have the skills that support a peak performance identity. You understand the systems that make excellence sustainable. Now you're ready to become someone for whom legendary performance is simply how you operate. Your current identity was formed through repeated actions and experiences over time. Your performance identity can be transformed through the same process, deliberately choosing actions that reinforce your desired identity until that identity becomes natural and automatic. The foundation of identity transformation is understanding the feedback loop between actions and identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Every time you optimize your energy, you vote for being someone who operates with sustained vitality. Every time you maintain focus despite distractions, you vote for being someone who achieves deep concentration. Every time you regulate emotions effectively, you vote for being someone with emotional mastery. Champions understand that identity change happens through action consistency rather than identity declaration. You don't become a peak performer by deciding you're a peak performer. You become a peak performer by consistently performing the actions that peak performers take. Identity follows behavior when behavior is consistent over time. Here's what changes everything. Start acting as if you already are someone who has mastered energy, focus, and emotional regulation. Don't wait until you feel like that person. Begin implementing the systems and behaviors immediately. Your identity will catch up to your actions when your actions are consistent over time. The most powerful identity transformation technique is identity-based goal setting. Instead of setting goals about what you want to achieve, set goals about who you want to become. Instead of, I want to improve my focus, choose, I am becoming someone who maintains laser-like concentration. Identity-based goals create motivation for the daily actions that transform identity. Identity reinforcement happens through small wins and consistency rather than dramatic transformations. Champions celebrate small victories that reinforce their desired identity. They notice and acknowledge when they successfully optimize energy, maintain focus, or regulate emotions effectively. They understand that identity change happens through accumulated evidence rather than single dramatic events. Social identity is incredibly powerful for sustaining transformation. Champions surround themselves with people who reflect their desired identity. They seek out communities of high performers. They limit exposure to people who reinforce limiting identities. They understand that social environment shapes identity as much as personal actions. The identity integration process involves aligning all aspects of your life with your performance identity rather than compartmentalizing peak performance to specific situations. Champions don't just perform exceptionally at work. They bring excellence to every area of life because that's who they are, not just what they do professionally. You're becoming someone who naturally seeks and creates peak performance because you understand that identity drives sustainable behavior change more effectively than external motivation or willpower. Legendary performance isn't something you do occasionally. It's how you live. Champions design their entire lifestyle around creating and sustaining conditions for optimal performance. They understand that every aspect of life either supports or sabotages their capacity for excellence. Lifestyle design starts with understanding that every choice has performance implications. Where you live, who you spend time with, how you structure your days, what you eat, when you sleep, how you move. Every aspect of lifestyle either enhances or degrades your capacity for energy optimization, focus mastery, and emotional regulation. Champions prioritize lifestyle choices that support their performance systems rather than hoping performance systems will overcome lifestyle choices that work against them. They choose living environments that support their energy needs. They structure social lives that enhance rather than drain their emotional energy. They design daily routines that automatically optimize their performance systems. The compound effect of performance decisions means that small, consistent lifestyle choices create massive differences in performance capacity over time. Champions understand that daily decisions about nutrition, movement, sleep, social interaction, and environment create the foundation for sustained excellence or inevitable mediocrity. Here's what separates amateur approaches from professional lifestyle design. Champions optimize for performance sustainability rather than short-term convenience. They make choices that might be slightly more difficult in the moment, but create conditions for effortless excellence over time. They understand that investing in performance infrastructure pays dividends for decades. Performance-based social curation is essential because social environment affects performance capacity more than most people realize. Champions build relationships with people who challenge them to grow, support their excellence, and maintain high standards. They limit time with people who normalize mediocrity or drain their performance energy. Environmental lifestyle design means choosing living and working situations that naturally support optimal performance rather than fighting against suboptimal conditions. Champions prioritize environmental factors that enhance energy, focus, and emotional regulation over environmental factors that might be convenient, but degrade performance capacity. The most advanced lifestyle strategy is performance integration, designing life so that performance optimization feels natural rather than forced. Champions create routines, environments, and social structures that make excellence the path of least resistance rather than something they have to force through willpower. Lifestyle experimentation involves systematically testing different approaches to find optimal lifestyle configurations, rather than accepting default options or copying other people's approaches. Champions treat lifestyle design as an ongoing optimization process rather than a one-time decision. You can start implementing immediately. Identify one lifestyle factor that consistently undermines your performance capacity and design a specific change that would support your systems instead. Choose one social relationship that elevates your performance standards and invest more energy there. Create one environmental change that makes performance optimization easier rather than harder. Making excellence inevitable rather than effortful is the ultimate lifestyle achievement because it transforms peak performance from something you do to something you are. Peak performance isn't a destination you reach and maintain. It's a continuous evolution toward ever higher levels of capacity and effectiveness. Champions understand that mastery is a process of constant growth rather than a fixed achievement. They design their approach to performance for decades of development rather than temporary improvement. The foundation of performance evolution is understanding that mastery has levels far beyond what most people imagine possible. What seems like peak performance today becomes baseline capacity tomorrow when systems are optimized and skills are developed. Champions never assume they've reached their limits because they understand that limits are usually system constraints rather than capacity constraints. Performance capacity compounds over time when systems are optimized consistently. Champions who master energy optimization in their 20s have more energy in their 50s than people who never learned optimization in their 20s. Champions who develop focus mastery early maintain cognitive sharpness decades longer than people who never train attention capacity. Here's what separates temporary improvement from lifetime evolution. Champions focus on developing capabilities rather than just achieving outcomes. They understand that building capacity creates options for future performance that aren't available to people who focus only on current results. The plateau prevention strategy involves systematically varying challenges and approaches to prevent stagnation. Champions don't repeat the same approaches indefinitely. They continue experimenting with new techniques, advancing to more sophisticated methods, and finding fresh challenges that require growth. Performance evolution requires balancing optimization with experimentation. Champions maintain their proven systems while testing new approaches that might enhance their capacity. They don't abandon what works, but they don't assume current approaches are optimal forever. They treat performance development as an ongoing research project. The most powerful evolution strategy is teaching and mentoring others. Champions who share their knowledge and guide others' development often discover new insights and approaches they wouldn't have found otherwise. Teaching forces deeper understanding and reveals gaps in current knowledge that create opportunities for further development. Legacy thinking transforms performance development from self-focused improvement to contribution-focused excellence. Champions who think about the impact they want to have over decades make different choices than champions who think only about immediate performance gains. They develop capabilities that create value for others rather than just personal advantage. Continuous learning and adaptation ensure that performance systems evolve with changing circumstances rather than becoming obsolete. Champions who learned peak performance principles decades ago continue updating their approaches based on new research, changing life circumstances, and evolving performance requirements. The ultimate performance evolution is becoming someone who naturally creates conditions for others' peak performance as well as your own. Champions who reach this level don't just perform exceptionally. They elevate the performance of everyone around them through their presence, systems, and influence. You're now someone who naturally seeks and creates peak performance because you understand that mastery is a continuous journey rather than a fixed destination. You've developed the mindset and systems that make lifelong performance evolution inevitable rather than accidental. Look at where you started versus where you are now. When you began this journey, you might have thought peak performance was about working harder, pushing through fatigue, or forcing yourself to focus when your brain was scattered. You've discovered that legendary performance is actually about working with your biology rather than against it, optimizing systems rather than relying on willpower, and creating conditions where excellence is inevitable rather than effortful. You now understand something most people never discover. Energy, focus, and emotions aren't obstacles to manage. They're systems to optimize. You've learned that these systems are neurologically connected and that mastering their integration creates compound performance advantages that seem impossible to people who manage them separately. You've developed capabilities that most people never realize are possible. You can optimize your energy across physical, mental, and emotional systems. You can control your attention with the precision of a world-class performer. You can regulate your emotions strategically rather than being controlled by them randomly. You can integrate all three systems for sustained excellence that others achieve only occasionally by accident. But more than developing skills, you've transformed your identity. You're no longer someone who hopes for peak performance. You're someone who creates it systematically. You're no longer someone who reacts to circumstances. You're someone who architects conditions for optimal outcomes. You're no longer someone who relies on motivation and willpower. You're someone who builds systems that make excellence automatic. You now operate from a completely different framework than when you started. Where you once fought against distraction, you now eliminate it systematically. Where you once forced focus, you now create conditions where concentration is natural. Where you once managed emotions reactively, you now regulate them strategically. Your daily experience has transformed. You wake up with energy systems that sustain you throughout the day rather than depleting by afternoon. You work with focus that allows deep concentration for hours rather than struggling with scattered attention for minutes. You navigate challenges with emotional stability that keeps you centered rather than reactive. You've developed the diagnostic skills to troubleshoot performance issues when they arise. You can identify whether problems stem from energy depletion, focus fragmentation, or emotional volatility. You have specific interventions for each type of performance disruption. You can adjust your approach in real time rather than hoping circumstances will improve. Your understanding of performance has evolved from amateur thinking to professional systems. You see performance as architecture to design rather than luck to hope for. You understand that consistency beats intensity, that systems beat motivation, and that optimization beats effort. You think like someone who builds sustainable excellence rather than chasing temporary achievements. You've learned to optimize your environment, design your lifestyle, and curate your social connections to support rather than sabotage your performance capacity. You understand that champions don't just develop internal capabilities. They create external conditions that make excellence inevitable. Most importantly, you've become someone for whom peak performance feels natural rather than forced. The systems you've learned aren't burdens you carry. They're capabilities you embody. The practices you've developed aren't disciplines you maintain through willpower. They're habits that express who you've become. You now possess elite-level skills that separate you from 99% of people who never learn to optimize their fundamental performance systems. You understand energy management at a level that allows sustained vitality for decades rather than burning out after years. You've developed attention control that enables deep work in a world designed to fragment focus. You've mastered emotional regulation that maintains stability during challenges that destabilize most people. You can create flow states systematically rather than hoping they occur accidentally. You can recover from setbacks faster and stronger, rather than being diminished by difficulties. You can sustain high performance over extended periods, rather than cycling between brief peaks and long valleys. Your integration skills allow you to orchestrate energy, focus, and emotions for compound performance advantages that exceed what any individual system could create alone. You understand how to sequence these systems optimally, how to troubleshoot when integration breaks down, and how to maintain optimization across all three systems simultaneously. You've developed the measurement and optimization skills that enable continuous improvement rather than performance plateaus. You can identify what's working, what isn't, and what changes might enhance your capacity. You treat performance development as an ongoing experiment rather than a fixed approach. You have the environmental design skills that create automatic excellence rather than effortful performance. You can optimize physical, digital, and social environments to support your systems rather than fighting against conditions that work against you. Most importantly, you've developed the identity and lifestyle integration that makes these capabilities sustainable rather than temporary. You're not someone who learned performance techniques. You're someone who embodies performance excellence. What you've mastered represents the foundation for even deeper levels of performance excellence. You've graduated from basic productivity to professional performance architecture. You've moved from managing symptoms to optimizing root causes. You've evolved from hoping for peak performance to creating it systematically. But this is just the beginning of what's possible. The capabilities you've developed create opportunities for performance levels that most people can't even imagine. When energy optimization becomes automatic, focus mastery becomes natural, and emotional regulation becomes effortless. You can tackle challenges and pursue opportunities that were previously impossible. Your next level of development might involve applying these systems to specific domains, becoming legendary in your professional field, achieving exceptional results in creative pursuits, or building extraordinary relationships. The foundation you've built supports excellence in any area you choose to focus on. You might discover that your performance capabilities enable you to contribute to others' development in ways you never imagined possible. Champions who master these systems often find themselves naturally becoming mentors, leaders, and examples for others who are seeking similar transformation. The systems you've learned scale upward infinitely. There's no ceiling to how optimized your energy can become, how sharp your focus can develop, or how sophisticated your emotional regulation can evolve. You have the foundation for decades of continued growth and development. You're ready to operate at a level most people can't even imagine, because you understand that peak performance isn't about talent, luck, or circumstances. It's about systems, optimization, and integration. You have the knowledge, skills, and identity that make legendary performance inevitable rather than accidental. But knowledge without implementation is worthless. Skills without application create no value. Identity without expression remains potential rather than reality. The transformation you've undergone will only matter if you actually implement these systems consistently, rather than filing them away as interesting information. Your challenge is to begin immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when circumstances are perfect. Right now. Start with one system, one practice, one optimization that you can implement today. Build momentum through action rather than waiting for motivation. Your challenge is to maintain consistency over time. These systems work through compound development rather than dramatic overnight transformation. Trust the process even when results aren't immediately obvious. Understand that small, consistent improvements create massive advantages over time. Your challenge is to continue evolving rather than settling for current levels of mastery. The capabilities you've developed are the foundation for even greater performance heights. Don't assume you've reached your limits, because the systems you've learned have no limits. Your challenge is to elevate others rather than just yourself. Share what you've learned. Model what you've developed. Become someone who creates conditions for others' peak performance as well as your own. Understand that true mastery is expressed through contribution rather than just personal achievement. You have everything you need to operate at legendary levels consistently and sustainably. You understand the systems that create peak performance. You've developed the capabilities that make excellence inevitable. You've become someone for whom exceptional performance is natural rather than forced. The only question remaining is, will you implement what you've learned, or will you remain the same person you were before this transformation was possible? You're ready to operate at a level most people can't even imagine. Your transformation begins now.